Welcome everybody to the Guruu Gaming Podcast. This is episode 1 entitled The Phantom Menace. No, of course not. It's called The Game Awards. I'm Richard and I'm joined by my colleagues Martine and Ryan. We're going to be talking about all things Game Awards, which game is going to be likely to be Game of the Year or at least be one of the nominees. So there's many games that have been featured this year. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man 2, Mario Bros. Wonder, so many games. What are your picks for the Game of the Year? Put it in the comments down below. It'd be interesting to read what your picks are. So, without further ado, let's get into a bit of discussion. Ryan, Baldur's Gate 3, dark horse, or politically not going to be there? What do you think?
Oh, I have no doubt it will be in the 6. I mean, it's hard to ignore just the feedback and the reception that game has had when it came out. I think it's, if you look at OpenCritic or Metacritic, I think it might be number 1 for the year overall. So there's no doubt in my mind it will be there as a nominee.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of winning, again, I think that's definitely, it's one of the two. In my mind, there are two that this is a battle between, and then the other 4, I think, don't necessarily have the same chance. And it's going to be Tears of the Kingdom or it's going to be Baldur's Gate. One of those two are going to take the crown, basically.
Yeah.
Do you think that Baldur's Gate 3's managed to pull in new audience though, or do you think it's people that have just loved the previous games?
I think it must have done. I mean, I've got friends who have played the originals and those who haven't, but I think just from the sheer noise that the game created, it made them curious enough to want to play it. And the fact it's on PS5 as well, it means that you're not limited to just PC gamers. So I think, and it's something that I've been curious about. It's just not having the time because it's no small game, from what I've heard. But I've never really had interest in those types of games. But seeing the reception to this and what people have said, it's definitely been one that I've put in my backlog to check out.
Yeah,
there's quite a few sort of big IPs that have had titles this year that might be contenders. I think we should perhaps also consider Diablo 4. We're talking about IPs that have had a following in the past. I think that had quite good reception when that released too.
It did.
Up there.
Do you feel the season pass stuff though could harm the chances of that though? Because I think it came out strong, but then with the microtransactions and things like that, are the press, those that are voting on these games, these nominees, are they likely to have that bitter taste left in their mouth that then makes them think of it in a more critical way than some of the other games?
Yeah, I was going to say, the numbers, as soon as we had Baldur's Gate 3 come in, around about that time of that season 1, as you mentioned with Diablo, there was a point where it just shifted. We had Diablo 4 on top, and then we went Baldur's Gate 3, and people were going, well, I don't have to spend any extra money with Baldur's Gate 3. And then it was all the streamers and the popularity came from it, and people started going, oh. And then we had the 900,000 concurrent players on Steam. So we had the numbers to definitely back it up. So I think that's something that outweighs it more during that time. That was a very difficult time that summer because then we had Starfield, didn't we?
Yeah, Starfield's an interesting one because obviously it's the big Xbox game of the year. But the thing that makes me believe that it may not make it as a nominee is that the views have been quite polarizing. Obviously every game has its lovers and those that are not so into it, but with Starfield it feels like that there is a big shift there between those two audiences where you'll have those that absolutely adore it, but then you have those who just really don't like it and say it's not good, or it's just your typical Bethesda experience with bugs and the scope is not what it was originally promised. There's loads of things that people are bringing up that talk about it in a more critical way. And so I think especially when you're looking at the other games this year, I mean 2023 in a way to me has almost been like, hey, 2017, where you just had this onslaught of big games, from Horizon to Breath of the Wild to Resident Evil 7, Mario Odyssey. It's the same sort of thing, and a number of those brands again, where it's Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's Mario Wonder, it's Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, and I feel like there are other games that perhaps have a more consistent reception to them than Starfield, which I think you'll have those that don't like it bringing that down. So for me, I don't think Starfield will make the cut of the top 6.
I think it will, just because it's been like a big new a big new IP, a big new release. It's had a lot of push. I think people are going to think about how big the release was, not just necessarily their own experience of the game. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
But aren't they supposed to base it on quality, like the outlets that are voting on this? So IGN and Kind of Funny and all these outlets that are voting on their favourite games based on their personal experiences with it. I'd like to think that they're not taking into account. Well, it's a big game for Xbox, so it should be here necessarily. I mean, maybe that is the belief to some degree, where it's like, Starfield should be there because it tries something. Maybe it doesn't succeed in the way that we'd hope, but it does try something.
I think that's a very good point, because it's one of, well, I'm just trying to think of others that were a kind of original IP, not from anything like books, movies.
I mean, I don't think it stands any chance of being in the top 6 at all. But if I was picking my top 6, I would have Lies of P up there.
Yes.
Again, it's a new IP. It made quite a big splash. It looks lush. I really love that steampunk style. So I would have that as my top 6, but I don't think it would make the cut, realistically. But again, it's another IP that was trying to do something a bit different.
I think that's merit, isn't it? Like trying something. The other titles are just sequels. You've got Assassin's Creed is following. It's another. Armored Core 6 is a sequel. Alan Wake 2 sequel. Diablo 4 sequel, all those remakes, yeah, absolutely.
What about Hogwarts Legacy? Would you say that's a new IP? Because I mean, it is as far as games
it's
go,
Harry
but
Potter,
it's not
isn't it?
because it's Harry Potter.
It's just in the same way that when you had, Shadow of Mordor. Like, would you say that was a new IP? You'd say no. It's a Lord of the Rings game, isn't it?
I mean it is as far as games are concerned, though, isn't it? But it's not because it's got its own other IP attached to it. No, I don't think Hogwarts Legacy will be in the top 6. I don't think it reviewed particularly well compared to some of the other titles.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
That came out back in February, was it? I think.
Yeah.
Is there going to be recency bias? Like, the more recent games that you play are fresher in your mind, and so are some of those titles going to have a better chance of being the first ones that people think of? And you look at something like Alan Wake 2, which is probably what the latest release that would qualify. I think they cut off, don't they, at a certain date in terms of if you release a game in December, then it will qualify for next year's Game Awards. But
that's the intro. When we're talking about like last year to this year, last year, I think I'm correct on this, the most anticipated game at the Game Awards 2022 was Tears of the Kingdom. So it'd be interesting to see where we are for this Game Awards, to see, is it going to be shortlisted? Is it going to win?
I think Tears of the Kingdom is definitely going to be in that shortlist.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I think Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate, those are the 2 spots that are guaranteed. The other 4 are where you start to get a little bit, they could be interchangeable. Because there's so many that could qualify. And also, when you look at the previous years, usually you tend to have the 5 big AAAs, and then you have like that one token indie game that gets fit in there. We've had like Hades previously, A Way Out, and I'm trying to think of indie games like Dave the Diver. Because that's one that's seen a lot of positive reception this year. Could that be, are they going to follow suit and do like, well, we need to have a smaller game in there?
Did we get Dredge this year? Yeah, but that's, again, it's one of these things where, again, recency bias type thing. Like, it's is it a case that the summer releases are going to be those ones that make the biggest splash, or at least the ones that will feature in the shortlist?
I don't know, because Resident Evil 4 remake was quite early on in the year, wasn't it? And I think that stands a chance of being up there.
Yeah.
And potentially Star Wars Jedi Survivor as well, and that was kind of earlier on.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, but then that came out with all the horrible bugs, didn't it, in some of the versions that made it unplayable. So again, is that the kind of thing that if you played the PC version, you're going to be like, no, I don't think that needs to be there at all. But I mean, and to your point on Resident Evil, whenever there's been a Resident Evil, Capcom tend to release it in January or March, and whenever they've done that, it still gets nominated. I think Resident Evil Remake 2 and Village, they were all nominated for Game of the Year despite coming out earlier in the year. So I think we're gonna see a mixture. We're gonna see, Baldur's Gate, Tears of the Kingdom. I think we're all in agreement that's going to be there. There's no way. If one of them doesn't make it, then I will be like absolutely shocked. But then the other 4, I think it's perhaps going to be Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, Mario Wonder, And then that sixth spot is where it gets a bit tricky. Like, I'm inclined to say Alan Wake 2, because I think the reception for that really, like, surprised. I knew it was going to be, a good game, like people were going to enjoy it, but to the level that it's come out of, you're seeing perfect 10s, in a lot of the biggest outlets.
Yeah.
And having played that game, I can see why. Like, it does some really interesting things with not just video games, but other mediums as well, by integrating, like, film and musicals and things like that.
Yeah, sorry for spoiling that. Bit of context, I decided to put in the musical element into our kind of group chat, and I was like, you were like, oh, that might be a spoiler, Rich. And it's like, yes, that's right. My apologies.
It's my
It's
fault.
all right. You
It's
took
my
it down
fault.
quite quick.
Yeah, it's my fault for not finishing the game within the 4 days that it had come out. So that's more on me, I guess. Than...
No, not at all. Not at all. I was just like, this is amazing. I love this.
And then it's that kind of stuff that, the first time that game reveals that, like, moment of cutting between, the video game and then the talk show is actually being filmed, and like, that sort of stuff is really interesting that you just don't tend to see in video games that much anymore. And also the sort of like the meta of it all, combining, and again, spoilers for for those that haven't played it, but I suppose it's kind of a known quantity at this point, that it integrates other Remedy games and characters from those games in it, which for fans is quite a cool little Easter egg moment that you see in it. But yeah, to go back to those 6, those are the 6 that feel right to me.
Yeah,
being Tears, Baldur's Gate, Resident Evil, Mario, Alan Wake, and whatever the 6th one I said was, Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
I think those feel right. I mean, there's others that you could interchange, like Street Fighter 6. Again, was a really high quality fighter. But
Mortal Kombat 1 as well.
Yes. Yeah, I don't
but the
think
microtransactions again, that could hurt it. That's the
it
thing.
hasn't been critically accepted quite as much as Street Fighter.
But the good news
we've
is
had Final Fantasy as well this year, haven't we?
Yeah.
16.
Yeah.
I
played
think
Final
that's
Fantasy
been quite quiet.
and enjoyed it, but at the same time, I'm not quite getting that vibe of, wow, this is one of the best experiences I've had of the year. Like, it's very the budget. You can see there's a big budget that's gone into this, but from a gameplay perspective, it's just not hitting that chord with me in the way that I hoped it would. But then I'm that person who, my only experience of Final Fantasy is I played 15 and really enjoyed that. But you ask a lot of the fans, they'll be like, "You're insane!" Like, what? So perhaps my opinion doesn't hold much weight there.
Well, I think the noise around Final Fantasy 16 this year has been quieter than previous releases. It's been the media and social chatter has been quite quiet, and also I would say the same for Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is obviously only just released quite recently. Again, recency bias perhaps, but the talk around it's been quite quiet. So
yeah, I guess that you're right. There's some games that you kind of go, oh, it's released this week, and then after a while, next week it's like, oh, is anyone actually talking about this? It's not, on Twitter or X or any other areas. It's not like, you think, oh, is this going to be constantly trending the same way like Baldur's Gate 3 spent a month maybe just constantly trending as a topic.
Yeah, and similar to Tears had that, didn't it, where you see everyone coming up with these insane inventions using the mechanics of the game. And it was, another game that, personally for me, I would love to see, but I probably doesn't have a chance, is Hi-Fi Rush. That game came out at the very opening of the year in January, and they shadow dropped that game as well, of all things. And that's such an interesting concept, the idea of taking like a Bayonetta style game and merging it with a rhythm game, and you don't really see that sort of thing. And I feel like that should be praised, because it's trying something unique. But as I say, I think because A, it's a new IP, B, it came out in January, and then lastly, because there's so many other high quality games that have come out, it will probably get nominated in some of the other categories, but not Game of the Year. As much as I would love to see it in Game of the Year, because I think it is a fantastic game.
Yeah.
I like another small one for me that again no one's going to agree with. I like Sea of Stars from a nostalgic point of view, because obviously I played a lot of games in the 90s and lots of those were RPGs, so it was very nostalgic for me because it really revisited those kind of classic RPGs. So I really like that one.
I think that's got a chance to, at least, if we're looking for something that's original IP. And I hope when some years I just
indie game. That could
Yeah.
be an indie game
Yeah,
that they slot in
yeah.
there along with the 5 bigger titles that tends to be the trend. So maybe because the reception for that was really good as well.
It has been positively received, and it's quite recent. So again, it's fresh in people's minds, isn't it?
absolutely.
But it's just a sort of feel good game for me, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I think we've got a nice tight list. What are, as we said in the comments, put your options, your suggestions, your ideas of how you think the nominees are going to go. Which game do you think is going to be Game of the Year? Thank you, Martine and Ryan, for your time for this first episode of the podcast, and hopefully more to come. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.